Navigating the dynamics of the Korean Peninsula requires more than just information, it demands insight. Korea Risk Group offers strategic consulting that cuts through the noise. Our experts provide in-depth analysis, risk assessments, and bespoke reports, all tailored to your specific needs. Whether you're exploring new opportunities or managing existing challenges, our insights can be your compass. To learn more about how we can help you make informed, strategic decisions, visit korearisk.com/solutions today.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to the NK News Podcast. I'm your host, Jacko Zwetsut, and this is being recorded on Tuesday, the 28th of April, 2026. I'm joined in the studio by Anton Sokolin. Anton, welcome back on the show.
Hey, Jacko, we have a lot of ground to cover today.
We do. For the listeners, a little bit of background. I lived in Korea for 3 years in the 1990s. I left at the end of 1999, and I came back in February 2004. And around that time, I started hearing about this word I'd never heard about before called OPCON, or short for Operational Control. And this was during the Roh Moo-hyun administration. It was very much a hot political potato here in South Korea, about Korea getting its operational control over its own military back from the United States, which had held on to it since the Korean War under an agreement between the two countries. And now I understand that this wartime operational control, because peacetime operational control was handed back, I think even before 2004, a long time ago, if I'm not mistaken. So the wartime operational control is now scheduled to be given back to South Korea in 2029, which is 3 years from now. If that does happen, and I want more details from you momentarily, but if that does happen, it'll be almost exactly 25 years ago since I first heard the term OPCON and the idea of Korea needs to get its OPCON back for reasons of national sovereignty, national dignity, etc. So tell me why it's in the news again now, Anton.
Well, Jacko, like you said, it's been 25 years. It's going to be 25 years since you've heard the word for the first time. And for me, it will be probably over a decade since I've been hearing this word. And it's been a very hot topic over 2 decades now. Everyone's talking about it because clearly it's a matter of national security. It's very important. For example, it's to a person who comes from Russia, like me, for example, this is even unthinkable that another country exercises some sort of even partial control over your armed forces. This is just unimaginable. And of course, for many people, for many observers, this is an important topic. And right now we are hearing some sort of like sunset kind of goal, some sort of a deadline when it's supposed to happen.
Yeah, and this is set by Commander of U.S. Forces General Xavier Brunson,
right,
who's also the head of the United Nations Command. And I should point out to listeners there that it's long been accepted that the return of OPCON to the Republic of Korea would happen. The question was when, what would be the deciding point? And for a long time, that deciding point was certain markers. It was things like interoperability, et cetera, et cetera. But now we have General Brunson saying it's a time point. It's 2029.
Exactly. So it's a deadline, right? We've already passed several stages of it. So there was initial, like you said, operational control. Then there was a full operational capability. And now we are going to full mission capability. And then, of course, now we are talking about the full control. Because clearly South Korean government wants to do that. For example, Lee Jae-myung, he has also placed it in the center of his agenda.
A lot of presidents from his party have made that a big issue.
Yeah, in this case, sovereignty and the right to exercise control over your armed forces is important for that particular party. If you're talking about the opposition, of course, it's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a reversed stance because they are more closely aligned with the U.S., and hence the presence of U.S. troops or UN troops associated with the U.S. is important here, and hence they would love to keep it. But the current administration is currently working on actually getting the control back. And well, honestly, this is not really my area of expertise. I do not cover this, but from my personal perspective, I think it's a welcome move. And if it happens, of course, South Korea will have a lot of challenges to deal with because South Korea will be left one-on-one with North Korea. But there is also China, of course. We know that USFK wants to work more work and pay more attention to China these days. Then there will be also challenges of modernizing the South Korean army to meet those challenges and be able to push back against North Korea in case of any provocations or anything. There is not going to be any shielding from the US. There is another problem, of course, the intelligence sharing. And recently it's also been a hot issue in South Korea when allegedly the US stopped sharing intel with South Korea. And it's another big deal. And if it happens, then it raises certain questions about South Korea's capability to detect and analyze and react upon certain things, right? So when it comes down to, for example, North Korean missile launches, that will become crucial, and we'll have to keep a very close eye on these developments.
And it also raises the question of if there were ever to be another land war on the Korean Peninsula, and let's hope there's not, because we live here, and we have the South Korean army under the operational control of its own operational control of South Korea, and then the United Nations command led by the US forces, how do they work together when they're both in charge of their own military? But that's also where this was showing the limits of our knowledge. There's also a thing called Combined Forces Command, and the commander of the Combined Forces Command is the same as the commander of the UN Command, General Brunson. So that's where the US and South Korean armies work together, and that's where interoperability is a very important word there, and all sorts of things like command and control, etc. So I think before we embarrass ourselves any further by showing the limits of our knowledge,
right, let's get back to something that I really know.
Yeah, let's get back to something that we really know. And that is that, for many decades, for many, many decades, there has been something in Pyongyang called the Friendship Hospital. And if a foreign diplomat or foreign visitor to North Korea gets sick or has an accident, gets injured, they end up in the Friendship Hospital. And now I understand that there's to be a new Friendship Hospital opening up in the area of Wonsan near the Kalma resort. And Russia's playing a part in the construction and building of this. So tell us about this.
Right. So several big delegations actually visit North Korea over the past week from Russia, right? And one of the big projects was the construction of this Friendship Hospital. So they broke ground, and right now the location. So probably I need to say a few words about the location, right? So it's the Wonsan-Kalma.
So it's in the Kalma resort.
It's by it, right?
Okay,
so it's pretty much in the area. And the fact is that it's a big area. North Korea opened it last year, invited lots of Russian, not so many, but there were some Russian tourists. And so far, Russians have been the only foreigners that could enter the area. But mostly it's for North Koreans and Russians, but potentially probably could house also Chinese tourists if Chinese tourism ever resumes. Questions of healthcare, they probably were very acute at that point because they should have thought through that if you're going to accommodate a lot of foreign tourists, they will need medical healthcare, right? They will need certain services.
But this is nothing new, right? I remember when the Marshigyeong ski resort opened up more than 10 years ago, there were talks of, if you're skiing at Marshigyeong and you break your leg, you may have to be helicoptered to the Friendship Hospital in Pyongyang, which is one good reason to think about safety. Maybe don't go to Marshigyeong if you're.
There we go, and it's not really far from Wonsan, right? So usually Russian tourists, when they go to Wonsan or Marshigyeong, they stop by at either locations and etc. So that is important, and that is understandable. But we cannot assume that this hospital is going to be serving only foreign tourists. That is unlikely.
It would be unfeasible.
Yeah, and according to the Russian health ministries read out about the opening, they are also going to provide services to local people. And I think this comes to an important junction when North Korea is trying to revamp its healthcare system, build more hospitals, of course, upgrade those lackluster regions, backwater regions.
Part of the
2010
project.
2010 project, right? And it only makes sense if this hospital is going to help patients from around the area. And if I'm not mistaken, but I think the readout mentioned hundreds of thousands of people living nearby would be able to access this hospital. Wonsan is one of the biggest cities in North Korea and clearly houses a lot of population. And having a modern medical facility there is of extreme importance. Now,
a burning question is, are there any plans to staff this hospital with Russian doctors or Russian medical?
It's probably too early to talk about that.
Okay, so that wasn't mentioned in the readout.
Yeah, what we know now is that they broke ground on it. There is Russian participation. I don't know to what extent that participation goes, because they said that they will participate. So it's a DPRK, Russia Friendship Hospital. But if we are talking about their participation, it doesn't mean that they are going to design the hospital or they already designed it. Or are they sending their construction brigades? Is it also a thing, right? Probably not. But stuffing it with modern medical equipment, that I can believe, because that is pretty much out of question. If you remember, the new Pyongyang hospital also was
Which took many years to build.
Yeah, it took many years to build, and Russia actually played a role, putting himself, right, said that, well, look, our North Korean comrades are asking us for help because they cannot finish it or something, so give them what they need. And I assume a similar level of involvement could be observed in that particular hospital as well. So it's a good thing. There will be tourists going there. There will be North Koreans going there. Now, of course, we know that North Korean medical system, even though it's relatively good, and I'm citing Professor Andrei Lankov, it's relatively good for a poor country. Now we know also certain the dark sides of the medical system there, that it's a lot of corruption is involved. And of course, even though it's a universal coverage, but you don't really get covered, right? You sometimes have to buy medicine on your own,
bring your own medicine,
bribe doctors to get an operation done. So we still have to see how it's actually going to function in practice.
Now, Anton, a burning question for me is should we interpret this as a sign that Russia-North Korea cooperation and that the relationship in general is deeper and more solid than we've heard a lot about it's transactional, it's of the moment, it's ad hoc, it's largely about the war in Ukraine. But opening a big project like this, it's a longer term thing. What do you think?
Let's put it simply. North Korea is clearly interested in keeping Russia close as long as possible, because it just literally found a new patron that can provide certain things that were unimaginable before, right? So for instance, like we have all these construction projects like skyscrapers in Pyongyang. We are seeing these hospitals, we're seeing modernization, we're seeing cars. We are seeing a lot of wealth flowing into North Korea. Well, military cooperation is key there, but North Korea wants to make sure that these inflows of wealth, they do not end with the war. And having these mutual joint projects, right, with Russia, they only can cement the partnership. And it makes sense. It's, of course, hospital, it's still way short of building a full-fledged, for example, nuclear facility. If you build a nuclear plant, that's it. Your relationship is sealed for decades. And that's what probably, well, I think it could be in the cards with Russia later if it's interested. For Russia is getting a new ally, a stable ally. Kim Jong-un has already pledged multiple times that it's going to be with Russia. So in the situation when Russia finds it's more and more isolated from the West, having another ally, it just makes sense. Of course, it all can wind down easily. It could go for 2, 3 years, 4 years, right? And then it just gets back to somewhat normal, and maybe Kim Jong-un chooses a more independent course of action. So we cannot speculate about that too much, but indeed it does indicate that Russia and North Korea have a very deep level of cooperation. Their friendship is strong for now, and probably now we have to cover the military aspect because
that's
just naturally leads to it. Right?
That's right, exactly. So Kim Jong-un last weekend, the same weekend as Anzac Day, when Australians and New Zealanders remember their soldiers that fell, not just in the Korean War, but all wars, Kim Jong-un went to inaugurate a new cemetery, new memorial place with an unusual name for the North Korean soldiers who have fought in Russia, on the side of Russia against Ukraine.
Right. The museum has a name for soldiers who have fought overseas military operation. They call it like this, right?
Yeah.
So, why is this important? Well, there's several things, right? It's all about symbolism. And just to break it down, top-level Russian officials visited the place. It was the chief of Duma. Duma is the lower chamber of the Russian parliament. Russia has a bicameral parliament system, so is the lower chamber. And the defense minister himself. None of them are actually military people, even though he's a defense minister. It doesn't matter. He's a finance guy. But anyway, he was appointed for different purposes. You can find some other podcasts describing who that guy is. We're not going to tackle that. The point is, 2 high-level Russian officials visited it. They kneeled in front of the floral wreath, and laid them, and joined Kim Jong-un on this ceremony. They opened the defense minister of Russia and the North Korean defense minister. They all actually inaugurated, they cut the inaugurational ribbon of the place. So there was a lot of theatrics, a lot of symbolism involved. Here's several things. Russia does go out of its way to celebrate and glorify the North Korean contribution to the war. Probably North Korea appreciates it because for North Korea, domestically, it sends a message that we are strong, we have a strong ally, and we are capable, we are modern.
That's right.
And another thing that really caught our eye is the fact that this cemetery/memorial has multiple graves, right, of North Korean soldiers that actually died in action, were killed in action in the Russian region of Kursk.
Right.
And now we also see these memorial walls with multiple names carved on them. And the assumption is that these are the names of the people who were killed.
Right.
And back of the napkin calculation is that over 2,000 people, North Korea lost about 2,000, more than 2,000 soldiers. I know the precise number, but I'm not going to tell you, read the article. But over 2,000 people were killed. And we know it for a fact, which actually aligns pretty neatly with Western and South Korean estimates that placed the number of casualties at 1.5K to 2,000, something like that. And it pretty much confirms the estimates. Another thing that this memorial boasted was the trophy equipment that the North Koreans and the Russians captured from Ukraine. And I'm talking about Western equipment. So we have seen all those. Abrams tanks, Leopard tanks, lots of British and I think Turkish APCs, personal carriers. We've seen French wheeled tanks, those AMX, the famous ones. So it's all there. And of course, we're not talking about that like, wow, North Korea is going to look at Western equipment and learn something fancy and like modernize its military. No, it doesn't work like this. It's pretty much this weaponry that they have on display. It's unused. You cannot use it. It's out of use. But it's destroyed. But still, the message there started this kind of section with the symbolism, and I'm going to end it with it because symbolism prevails, and the North Korea with this equipment can demonstrate that it's a strong, capable army. It demonstrates to its own people that they have prevailed over so-called Nazis, Ukrainian forces, their lackeys or their supporters, and send the additional message to its domestic population that, well, we're doing great. And this is, of course, of importance, and it only serves one purpose, right? It strengthens the regime, its military capability. Because in any war, information warfare is extremely important. And now we have entered the age where the lines are blurred, and information warfare is the same warfare as like military warfare. And when it comes to controlling the narrative, North Korea is probably doing pretty great.
And that's where we're going to have to stop there, Anton. After the break, for our listeners, I have a long interview with North Korean refugee author Eunhee Park with her book, The Courage to Die. And a brief announcement to our listeners that this will be my last time recording the regular weekly podcast for NK News. You'll have a new host from next week, but I will stick around to do monthly podcast interviews as a guest host. So you haven't seen the last of me yet, listeners. Thank you very much. It's been an honor to be hosting the NK News podcast for the last 8+ years. It's a long time. So thank you, and listen again next time. Okay, so our long interview today is with Eunhee Park, and she is a North Korean refugee and an author, public speaker. She's recently published her memoir. It's called The Courage to Die. Her work, she has a clear first-person account of her experience growing up as a child in North Korea, escaping and then rebuilding a new life here in South Korea. And you can find her on Instagram at North Korea-Eunhee, that's EUNHEE, North Korea-Eunhee, all one word, on Instagram. Eunhee, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. I know we've been talking about you coming on the podcast for many years, and here you finally are, so I'm very glad that you're here.
Thank you for having me.
So you're born originally in Wonsan in North Korea, on the east coast of North Korea, and it's almost 30 years ago, right? But in the 1990s?
1991.
Okay, so just before, a few years before the death of Kim Il-sung and a few years before the arduous march, the big period of famine.
Exactly,
All right.
yeah.
So that's sort of the opening. Can you explain, how did you choose the title of your book, The Courage to Die? It sounds a bit dark.
I mean, because when I decided to leave that country, I left with the courage to die. That's why I made this title for my book.
Right, because you thought, I might not live, I might die, but anything is better than staying here. Is that sort of the thinking process?
Yes. We only live once, so why not? I mean, there is no hope. So I decided to live with the courage to die. Whatever it takes, whatever it comes to death, I will figure it out my way to get the freedom.
How old were you at that time?
21.
That's a big, usually at 21, people are deciding, where shall I go to university, or what kind of job, or who will I date? But you were making the decision to live or die.
But actually, that thought came from at the age of 17. That was the year, when I was 17, that was the first time that I watched the South Korean dramas illegally and secretly.
Yeah.
And I found the freedom, the concept of freedom to express myself as a woman. But it wasn't easy to escape from my hometown, Wonsan, which is east coast of North Korea. So it took me 4 years.
4 years, from that moment of watching a South Korean drama until finally you crossed the border into China. And you went from China to Laos and Thailand before finally reaching South Korea.
Yeah.
So many stories of fleeing North Korea exist. There are, I think maybe my first book written by a North Korean refugee was The Aquariums of Pyongyang by Gang Chol-hwan. But there are many of them now. At that time it was very rare. So why did you decide to publish your story? And what do you hope that readers can learn from your book that they won't learn from another book?
So the differentiation from my book and other North Korean factors, I can say, I vividly explained about the experience in South Korea, which is free country. Most of our readers read about story of ending of escaping. But my book, it elaborates more story, furthermore than escaping. For me, escaping, as for every North Korean factors, escaping is just the not ending of our story.
It's the beginning.
It's just
or
beginning.
It's a new beginning.
It's a new beginning of the life, and it wasn't easy for me to settle in South Korea as a North Korean defector. That's why I wanted to deliver my story vividly, what I had been through in South Korea, because I learned that freedom isn't free. That's what I want to deliver to readers. Freedom isn't free, but freedom has a lot of beautiful burdens that unless you take responsibility, you will lose your freedom easily.
Beautiful burdens. That's a good phrase. Now, you write about growing up in North Korea amidst divorce, family mental illness, and frequent moves from house to house. So how did those experiences shape you?
I mean, North Korea itself, there are a lot of toughness. It's a war zone to survive day by day. But because of that experience with my family dynamics, I think I became tougher and stronger and became very independent at an early age, because I learned that nowadays I'm watching a lot of videos related to attachment issues. Have you ever heard of it?
I've heard about it. I don't know much about it.
There are several types, but one is anxious attachment type, which means the children didn't have consistent love, so they blame themselves. They are not enough to receive love. But my case is avoidant attachment type, which means you cannot trust anyone. Because of the childhood I had been through, as I described, my grandmother just suddenly grabbed me and then sent to the orphanage. That's how I ended up in the orphanage for 5 years. And I think as a young age, I decided not to feel my emotions. And then I decided I think I learned how to suppress my emotions and then think about how to survive that kind of environment. So with that kind of family dynamics, I became very tough woman and independent woman, I can say.
Yes, you mentioned the orphanage where you spent 5 years, and you said you describe it as a place of control, not a place of care. What did a typical day in the orphanage look like, and how did you cope with hunger and the strong discipline?
I mean, what is the best way to explain about the orphanage life is like military base as a young age for children. Like I was sent there at the age of 10 or 11 years old, and we had to wake up at 6 or 5:30 in summer, and then there were like a gathering march event that we had to participate, and maybe 30 minutes of running the playground, and after that we marched towards the restaurant,
the cafeteria.
And there are we are served just 100 grams of the grains and corn flour rice, and after maybe breakfast we went to the classroom to study about Kim dictators, all the histories.
The lives of Kim Il-sung, the lives of Kim Jong-il.
For 30 minutes, and then it starts maybe the subject starting at 7:30, and then finished around 1 p.m. And after that, we went to the cafeteria to have the same meal, like just 2 or 3 pickles, and along with 100 grams of the corn rice mixed up with the green vegetables like that. And then we also had to go to classroom again to practice what we've learned in the morning, but it's all materials related to Kim's worships.
So there wasn't science, geography, chemistry, mathematics, that kind of thing?
No, I mean, there are kind of like subjects exist, yes. But there are a lot of events that we had to participate at the event. We had to memorize all the materials of Kim dictators. So most of the time we study about Kim's histories, because unless you pass that exam, you can go up to the other level of your studying.
Right. Now, why did your family decide to put you in the orphanage?
To be honest, I don't know. I was too young. I didn't have any autonomy for me. And my grandma just brought me to the orphanage. Just suddenly.
Were your parents still alive at this time?
No, my parents got divorced when I was 4, which was very unusual in North Korea. And my mom became mental patient. And then my dad,
you were living with your grandparents?
So from my maternal grandparents.
Yes.
And when I was 10 or 11, she just brought me to the orphanage. And then I didn't have any autonomy, like which place I wanted to live. I was just a little girl. So, but after maybe 5 years old, I couldn't ask her. But meantime, I explained it in my book that why didn't you bring me here? And she didn't explain. She just started crying. I think I assumed that my grandparents didn't have enough money to raise me.
They didn't have the resources yet.
I think they decided to put me there because the orphans can at least have a free meal and a free education.
Now, as you said, those years made you tougher, stronger, and they built your will to live. What are some of the strengths or the skills from that time that still help you today here living in South Korea? What are some things you can do today thanks to your difficult time in the orphanage?
I mean, a lot. Because of that experience that I had in orphanage, I know how to survive from nothing. When I came to South Korea, I was alone. Still, I don't have any family members. But because of the survival skill, I learned how to survive from nothing. I could rebuild my life in South Korea by using that skills that I've learned in North Korea in orphanage.
Would every young North Korean who goes to an orphanage learn the same skills that you did? Or do you think you are maybe unusual or special in that way?
I mean, let's put it this perspective. Every student learn same curriculums.
Yes.
But some of them are extraordinary people. So I can say maybe everyone is from North Korea, but everyone has different skills.
Right.
So I can say maybe I might be different than other people from North Korea.
No, that's fair enough. Now, you studied hard. You did well in school with your classes, even the classes about the Kim's life. But you met barriers related to your family songbun and also issues related to bribery. Tell us a little bit about that and how those experiences taught you about opportunity and merit, what merit means in North Korea.
Merit means, it's all comes from songbun. It's back to bloodline, right? But
So who was your father? Who was your grandfather? Who was your mother? And what did he do during the Japanese time? That's what's important, right?
Yes, exactly. But my grandfather was born in South Korea. I think he was born in Gyeongsang province. But I was too young to ask which city he's from. But back then, South Korea was a very poor country. So he was born in 1932.
Yes.
So it was a very poor country, all right? So he
was 18 when the war started, the Korean War.
18, yes. But he was in China. Because when he was 2 years old, his family immigrated to China and then settled in China. That's how he came to North Korea during the war.
Yeah.
So obviously my songbun wasn't that great because he lived in China, which is a little better than North Korea, and then he has a little bit different experiences. So he was sent, even if he fought in the war, my grandfather fought in the war, he was sent
on the North Korean side.
In a North Korean side, but because he had the experience, he lived in China, he speaks perfect Mandarin, so he was always supervised, and then he was always watched by the government.
So they didn't trust him.
Yeah, he was sent to very rural area in Wonsan, and then one day when the electricity off.
Yes.
He was working at the electric pot.
At the power plant.
Yes. And then he went up to fix it and got
electrocuted.
And then he had to cut his left arm, but there was any compensation for it. And then he suffered with that disabled, life forever.
Yeah. So from that, did you get this idea that I can't succeed here, that there is no such thing as merit which is earned? It's all merit that you receive from your parents or grandparents?
So, as I mentioned in my book, there was the moment that I witnessed the injustice in North Korea while I was entering to university by passing all the exams. Like, it's a North Korean, the entrance of the exam to go to university is totally different than in a free country. You don't need to write up a personal statement, all the things. You have to pass the certain points. So firstly, I passed all the points, and then I was the only one in my school who earned that credit to go to university. But I didn't bribe. So eventually I got failed from the university.
So you have to pass some kind of a test, and you also have to pay. Who would you be paying?
I think to the maybe head of the university. Back then it was in 2008. And then that university was remodeling of that kind of buildings, and then they needed money. But the government didn't fund it at all. So the teachers, all the staffs had to figure it out independently. And then the students, especially the students who wanted to go to that university, had to pay all the money. And
were you asked for a specific amount of money?
That was $500.
$500 US dollars?
US dollars.
Did they want it in foreign currency, or did they want it?
Foreign currency. Like we in Wonsan, we use the dollars and in the Japanese
yen,
Japanese one, and then Korean one, and then sometimes the North Korean one, and then sometimes euros. So
what about Chinese renminbi?
The Chinese one is from the north part of North Korea, but in Wonsan it's nearby. Yeah, so we don't use Chinese yen in Wonsan.
Okay. So you were asked to give $500 or the equivalent in some kind of
equivalent, like you can buy very small one-room house in rural area in Wonsan.
Okay.
Which is a lot.
Right. And did you want to pay the $500?
I wanted to pay, but I had nothing to offer. I was a student. I was too young, but my grandparents heard that a specific amount of money they had to pay for my, the exams or whatever. But they didn't have enough money to pay for it. And then also they didn't even ask to my rich uncle to pay for it.
There was a rich uncle.
Like they could definitely ask the money from my rich uncle. He could help me. However, my grandparents, like he is my grandparents' son, and then my grandparents didn't want to burden on him. So they didn't ask any help from my uncle, and eventually I got failed, even if I was the top student in my school. And then that was the first account that I realized that there are a lot of injustice.
So now you're here in South Korea. You left North Korea
14 years ago.
14 years ago. So now, looking back, was that the only possible way for you to succeed, or could there have been some other way that you could have succeeded in North Korea?
There is no any way to succeed. I mean,
without the money?
Yes, without money.
What if you had asked your uncle yourself?
My uncle just runs the goat farms and the fishery, and I didn't want to work there. And the only way, there was the perception for women is the only way to have a better life is meet the guy who has a better 성분, and then that
marry him.
Yes, elaborates our 성분. That's the only way that we think that we could have better life in North Korea.
Now, what was the turning point for you when you realized, okay, that's it, I'm 21, I've got to go? And how did you prepare yourself for that journey mentally?
That was when I was 17, after watching South Korean
dramas. So that was already the turning point?
Turning point.
Okay, so 17. For 4 years, you already decided, one day I'm going to go.
So
and then it was 4 years of preparation.
Yes.
Well, it wasn't finding easy. The right moment.
I mean, as you met a lot of North Korean defectors, most of them are from north part of North Korea.
Yeah, Hamgyongbuk-do, Haesan.
Yes,
yeah, sure.
So it's because it's easy to escape. But from my hometown, Wonsan, which is a nearby DMZ, but which is the most dangerous route to escape. So I had to travel to the Haesan firstly, but there was no freedom of movement. Right, so I had to prepare.
Did you ever try to move and somebody stopped you and said, "Where's your pass? You can't go through. Go home."
So here is my story. I had to bribe to buy the 통행증.
Yeah, pass. It's a pass of freedom of movement pass.
That one I bribed the $20 or $30, and then it took 2 months to get it, and I bribed the train manager so I could stay with him in a small room in the train so no one could check me because I was too young, 21 years old, and it was very obviously people can suspect me to go to China.
Traveling alone.
Traveling alone. So I stayed there, but I bribed him firstly.
Right. Did you ever meet any other refugees who came from Wonsan here in South Korea?
Yeah, I have 1 or 2 friends who are same age from Wonsan.
Oh, the same age. Okay. Because as you say, it's quite rare, and I just kind of wonder, statistically, I'm fascinated. Do you think more people from Wonsan went through China, or more people from Wonsan took a boat and came, or somehow crossed the DMZ?
First route.
Oh, so most of them still come through China.
Yes.
Even though it's difficult and it's a long journey, most of them still come through China. Okay. Now, in your book, at the end of the last chapter of part 1, and it's a chapter called One Step Closer to Freedom and One Step Closer to Death, pages 115 to 120, it talks about the most difficult part of your journey. And it's very difficult reading. It's very, very painful. So if you're comfortable, can we talk about that a little bit?
I think a lot of readers, a lot of people who are already interested in North Korea, they know what we have to go through to get the freedom in China and human trafficking and the rape happening things.
And when you say we, you mean North Korean women mainly,
North
right?
Korean women,
Right.
yeah. But for me, someone who is from Wonsan had to confront that kind of violent events since I left my hometown Wonsan to all the way to go to the Haesan, which is within North Korea, because no freedom of movement. As I explained before, I had to bribe the train manager to be with him, not to be checked by other authorities, so I could be safe to go to the Haesan. But it took me 72 hours to go to Haesan from my hometown. I mean, which distance from Wonsan to Haesan, which equivalent to from Seoul, maybe Busan.
Okay.
So it's if you take a bullet train, it's just 3 hours away. But for me in North Korea, it's like there are a lot of the electrics on and off and a lot of stops there. So it took me 3 days.
3 full days, yeah.
Yeah. And 72 hours I was sexually abused by that man who was 40 or 45 years, I think 50 years old. And then when I denied him, he said, if you just step out of this door, what happened? He threatened me.
He threatened you, yeah.
So for 72 hours, I had to face that sexual abuse, that sexual harassment, assault. And then also, once I closed the border, the broker claimed that he is my dad's friend, raped me. And then almost like I had to wait in the nearby north part of North Korea for 2 months. I don't know why he didn't just send me to China right away. Maybe he wanted to rape me maybe before. So I had to be in Haesan for 2 months until I crossed China. But almost like a last day before I escaped across the China, he raped me, and then I lost my all hope and then called my dad. That's what happened to me. And then I hate human beings and things. But what my dad said to me, instead of embraces me, he said, you already are in Haesan nearby China. So forget about what happened and then figure it out what you can gain.
So he pushed you to keep going.
Yeah. So, and then that happened to me. And after 3 days, the broker just like suddenly out of blue, like tonight, you would cross the river to go to China.
Wow.
So because I think he rushed me to send to China, because I was almost decided to go back to my hometown, not to escape at all.
Yeah.
And I wanted to kill him. I wanted to destroy his life.
Yeah.
So I think what I said, like I wanted to go back to Wonsan, my hometown. I didn't want to go to China and South Korea because he was afraid of maybe his safety, since my uncle was, like a very richest man, has a lot of connection with the authorities in North Korea. Then he maybe assumed that if I went back to maybe Wonsan again, his life might be destroyed. And then after those 3 days, he raped me, and then he just suddenly sent me to China.
So what made you decide to include these awful experiences in your book, and what do you hope that readers will learn from that, or understand from reading that?
I mean, there are a lot of stories since, like Eunhee Park told about, witnessing her mom was raped in front of her. And I have a lot of North Korean women, like female friends, who had this type of experiences living in China, got beaten by her husband, and then sexually assaulted, raped, things. That's a story. But what I want to deliver to the audiences is that even if we experience that in humanity, and then the worst part of human beings, we still carry our lives to be stronger, to survive in this country by enjoying the freedom we earned. And I hope a lot of people can take away what the freedom means, and then what the value of freedom for them. Like to move other city, to move, to travel other country isn't the normal thing for North Korean people.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I know it's often hard for victims of or survivors of sexual assault to talk about or to write about these matters. Sometimes they even feel a guilt or a shame, or even writing about it or talking about it again can relive that trauma in their minds. And how are you with that?
Actually, first time that I felt my emotions while I was writing my story, because I came to South Korea alone and I didn't have any family to share what I had to go through to live in this country. And while I was writing my story at the first time, I think of that events at the first time, and I cried so hard. Like after, I think when I was in LA, and then it felt so free. But it doesn't mean that it's all the traumas I overcame from the traumas. I still have that trauma. If maybe someone, sexually tried to maybe close to me, and as especially the man tries close to me, I just put my wall first.
Yeah.
So
you put up a wall between yourself and
to protect
a mental
myself.
wall, obviously.
Yeah. So still, I have to, work on these issues. Like maybe many North Korean women has suddenly sometimes I cry, or if I think about that happenings. Yeah, that was but I can say it was very free.
Yeah, to write about it.
Write about it, and then the first time just put myself in that situation again, and what I had been through, and what I had encountered with that broker and the trade manager, things like. At the first time, when I came to South Korea, even if it happened to me, I thought it's supposed to, to be happened to get the freedom. I thought
this is the price.
Yeah, that's the price that I had to pay for to get the freedom. But now, looking back, it wasn't right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, of course. Yeah. We know in the last 30 years, since the Arduous March, most refugees from North Korea have been women, many of them traveling alone or in small groups. Do you think that, some form of sexual abuse, how common is it among North Korean women defectors?
It's quite normal.
It's
quite normal.
So common that it's normal.
Because in North Korea, inside North Korea, because most of the women go to market to sell products. Yeah. And then there are authorities to check and to receive the fees. Yeah. And if maybe the woman is pretty, the authorities target that woman. And then instead of receiving the fee, they request to have sex with them. And then as a woman in North Korea, we think that's the price that we have to pay for surviving.
Okay, so you're saying it's not just normal for women who are escaping from North Korea, it's just part of life in North Korea.
Yeah, it's just we think that's the normal thing that we have to face in order to survive in North Korea.
Looking back now, what kind of support, editorial support, emotional support, or community support helped you to open up and to write and to share your experiences?
There are a lot of supports, but because of the fact that I'm from North Korea, as you know, there are a lot of discrimination. So maybe
here in South Korea,
very looked down North Korean defectors, and it's not easy to get a job because of the place where we are from. But because of the same fact that where we are from, there are a lot of people also support North Korean defectors. For example, maybe some volunteers teach English to North Korean defectors, and some organizations have a program to educate North Korean defectors like that.
Like we've got Freedom Speakers International and Liberty in North Korea Link.
A lot of organizations are supporting North Korean defectors. So because of that, I think the occasions to meet the people who are from other countries and help North Korean defectors, I found my identity as a North Korean defector. Before, I was so ashamed, to be a North Korean defector, because if I say I'm from North Korea, it's not easy to get a job. And then firstly, we don't hire North Korean defectors, we don't hire foreigners, even if we have a South Korean citizenship.
Yeah.
But after meeting a lot of volunteers, I realized that, there are some people who discriminate us, but others support me because of the same reason. So because of that love and, unconditional support, I now I can freely speak about my experience. And also by telling that story, I can say it heals my wounds.
So does it become easier for you over time as you tell the story again and again, or does it always bring up some feelings of pain?
No, it's not easy. Especially the sexual harassment and rape events, I didn't talk about it at all in the past. but I already mentioned in my book. So it was my first time to reveal what I had been through while I was escaping from Wonsan to Haesan. Because there are a lot of the story of North Korean women got raped and people already know that stuff. But my main message is, even if North Korean women had this experience, we have a strength to build our new life in free country with the gratitude for the freedom. That was my message.
And now that you're speaking and writing about these parts of your life, does it change how you hold the memories? Or like you talked about healing, how do you process or how do you heal? How does that work?
I think after writing my book, it was my first time to feel my emotions. As I mentioned before, in North Korea, I also had a different experience with my family dynamic. So sometimes like my grandparents are my heroes. I could say they are my role models. But suddenly just my grandma brought me to the orphanage. So I didn't have any deep trust with my family members. So that's the way to survive there is just putting the thick wall to protect myself, like a survival mechanism that I built. And when I came to South Korea, also same. People discriminate me because I'm from North Korea, but I know how to suppress my emotions. And then I know how to be logic to figure it out my survival way. So I didn't feel any emotions for 10 or 12 years, I think, until I wrote my story. And now I do feel more emotions. That's what happened. And a few days ago, while I was eating fried eggs, I thought about my grandparents. They lived in North Korea for 83 years, 85 years. However, I think in life, they just had only 30 eggs because it's not easy to offer the egg every day. But here, suddenly I just made 4 fried eggs
without. Because you can.
Yeah, because I have money and then I can offer. But in North Korea, it's not easy to offer 4 eggs at once. And I just cried a lot. And I thought about like, what if I could make these fried eggs for my grandparents?
Right.
So now, like I do think about my past a lot, and then I do feel my emotions freely. And then I am in a healing journey, I can say.
I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but it sounds healthy. Does it feel healthy to you to be able to feel these things and talk about it?
I don't know whether it's healthy because I have a very survival mechanism. Like my brain, I think works, still works in a life-death line. So when I feel that emotions, I don't think it's a weakness. I cannot go further. But I'm trying to learn how to feel all my emotions freely. So I learn how to be a human.
Yeah.
That's what I explained to my friends. For 10 years, I didn't know how to feel my emotions because I'm so good at suppressing my emotions to survive in a new country with no one. But now, like, I could feel my emotions. I feel like I'm becoming a human being.
Now, what do you want to understand about your first days of freedom here in South Korea?
A lot of people ask me what was the impression of South Korea and how did you feel about the freedom at the first time, but I didn't, place to understand what the freedom means in South Korea because I came alone and I had to catch up all the advanced worlds and technologies. So I can say after 5 years, I could finally analyze what's the big difference between North Korea and South Korea. And firstly, what I learned about the freedom is, as I mentioned before, freedom isn't free. When I was in North Korea, while I was watching South Korean drama, I imagined the world. If I go to South Korea, the money would fall down from the sky without any effort, responsibility. But when I came to South Korea to live and survive with that freedom, I had to take accountability and responsibility to live and then to make my life better. So that's what I learned. Like a freedom to have a lot of free means that you are free. You have to take your responsibility to enjoy the freedom what you are given. That's my message.
What you say reminds me a little bit of, some people from the former East Germany, which was a communist state like North Korea. And then after German unification, some of the East Germans, they missed it sounds strange to say, but they missed the lack of freedom because you have a structure, every day, this is what I must do. And the government tells you, this is where you work, this is how you live, this is what you do. And in this new freedom also can mean chaos, can mean
definitely.
failure, can mean a lot of bad things too. Does that resonate with you?
Yes. And sometimes I miss North Korea. The things that I built the connection with the people because we don't have much distractions as like in South Korea and free country. I mean, every day you have to catch up all the informations, and there are a lot of like massive information you have to analyze in a free country. It means there are a lot of noises and distractions, and then that's why maybe a lot of people are mentally ill. But in North Korea, it's just simple, as you described about East Germany. Simple, you just like follow the rules and then you can live. But when I think of my life in North Korea, at least we have a community. When you are sick, a lot of neighbors come to see you, look after you. That's kind of things what I miss. But in South, a lot. That's why I say freedom is a beautiful burden.
Yeah, beautiful burden.
It's a burden, but it's difficult to live in a free society, free country, but it's much, much better than to live in North Korea. As I explained it, 4 eggs, people cannot offer 4 eggs at once in North Korea. But here, even if there are a lot of distractions, noises, burdens, things, at least you can enjoy. You can offer that kind of things, basic needs, and then you can think of your desires. But in North Korea, there is no any hope, no dreams.
Now, you also spent some time in Australia, where I grew up, on a working holiday. What did you learn there in Australia about work, community, and freedom? And did anything surprise you?
Oh, it's another world there, actually. I mean, coming to South Korea was shocking to me, but living there in Australia with different races and different people was another level of shocking, For example, when I worked at a cafe, in South Korea, there's not much options when you order coffee. It's like just they put the milk, maybe, but they're all milk, almond milk. So when I worked there, people asked me to give do you have a brekkie with the coffee with the almond milk, things like I didn't have that kind of concept.
Yeah.
As explained in my book, when I came to South Korea, I worked at a Paris Baguette and I never had the items in North Korea as an egg tart, pizza bread. In North Korea, just you can count the breads milk bread, 우유빵, 강냉이빵, cornbread. Things 3 or 5 types of the bread exist. When I came to South Korea, it's unlimited options I never had. So I got fired after 1 month because I didn't memorize all the items. But when I came to Australia, it's a different concept of freedom. And also the other thing is lesbians and gays.
You learned about minorities, sexual minorities.
Yes, sexual minorities, and holding hands together in the public and kissing each other, which is unusual in South Korea. And also someone who is from North Korea still very conservative, So for me, that was a shocking, culture shocking.
Sure.
And then one guy, that's what I learned. One lesson I learned, takeaway from Australia is, what is the word? Live your life with your will. In South Korea, there are a lot of, as you know, there are a lot of invisible rules. And
social rules, family
invisible
rules.
They don't loudly speak about that rules, but we have to follow invisible rules. And the standard of success maybe is going to work at a Hyundai, Samsung, big company. That's the the standard of success in South Korea. And as a North Korean factor, as I said, I wasn't comfortable with my identity. But when I went to Australia, the one event I witnessed was one guy didn't wear the shoes and I walked the street barefoot freely in front of the library, in Melbourne, and no one saw him. They just everyone lived their life, and I realized that wow, maybe I was ashamed with the fact that I'm from North Korea. Maybe it's not comes from outside of judgment. Maybe it comes from my in the internal analysis. Maybe I was ashamed of the fact that I'm from North Korea. That's why maybe people treat me like that. So that's what I've learned. Like hear your voices and then find your authenticity and then make it as a tool to be distinguished from others. That's what I've learned, like from that guy just walking with the barefoot in Australia.
Oh, it's a great lesson. Now, on the point of authenticity, and in this next question, you don't need to name anybody, but do you think that, we live in this attention economy these days, and there's a lot of competition for attention. And I just wonder, do you think that this competition for attention has led some North Korean refugee speakers or authors to kind of make their stories more exciting or more sad or more moving than the reality?
I don't want to name, but as a North Korean defector, I could see which one is authentic or not. But I don't want to name.
No.
And also from my experience as the television, personality.
Yes.
I was on the show Imangap, like
Yes.
now on my Meet You.
Yes, now on my way to meet you.
On my way to meet you. And I think for 3 years, I was a regular panelist. And what I learned from that TV show is, media is also business. So
Media's a business, yeah.
So you have to make the content a lot of people can click, which means if North Korean defectors want to make money, they have to tell their story dramatically. And then they can get attention, they can get more money because they have to survive. So when someone tells their story, we know which one is authentic or not. But end of the day, I believe people will figure it out. Which is authentic or not.
Now, you're a published author. You're also a social media person. You have an active presence on Instagram. How do you check your own stories and just I have to, I want to tell a good story, but I want to keep it authentic and honest. How do you sort of balance that?
My distinction from maybe others is I don't talk about North Korea generally. I do analyze the news or the media, the stuff related to North Korea, the macro side. But micro side, I do deliver my own experience. So I use the subject I, not we.
Right.
Because everyone is from North Korea, but everyone has different stories.
Right. So your story is your story.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you're not trying to generalize and say everybody or nobody.
No, it's when I meet North Korean defectors from other provinces, from other cities, I realized that we are from same country, but our experiences are totally different. And then I'm learning North Korea from them.
Right.
So I try to deliver my story, the contents based on my own experience, and I'm trying to use the subject as I, not we.
Well, then here's a difficult question. How can you tell the difference between a North Korean who simply had a very different life experience to your experience and a North Korean who is maybe not being 100% honest?
People gossip about it. People can gossip, but there is without that reason, you cannot create that story. It means
so where there's smoke, there's fire.
Oh, yes.
So there must be something behind.
Something behind it. That's why people gossip about it. And then end of the day, maybe it might be true, like 50% or things. So North Korean defectors, we have also strong North Korean community. Some people gather together and then they do talk about, But in the other hand, we have to also figure it out that maybe some people are just jealous of North Korean, activists who make more money. But somehow, it's true. Some part of true, that's why they talk about it.
I've also imagined imagine if I was escaping from North Korea and let's say I was escaping with 2 or 3 others, and somehow through some circumstances, I'm the only one who survives, and the other 2 or 3 are dead. And I might feel that, somebody should tell their stories. I know his life, and maybe without thinking about it, I include some parts of their story in my story. So it happened to somebody, but maybe it didn't happen to me. Do you think that happens? Do you think that kind of story changing or story borrowing happens in the North Korean defector community?
I don't know. I don't know that part. Maybe there are some people do it, but to be honest, as a North Korean factor, I mean, there are a lot of people who claim they are experts of North Korea, and then maybe some people might do same thing. So for me, as a North Korean factor, as long as you survive in a free country, be successful, and then make an impact on this world. Because even if they borrow others' stories, some part is which is true, that what that person experienced as well. And so I know who is a liar or things, but I don't want to name on it. I just wish them to be successful. As a North Korean factor, it isn't easy to survive in a free country.
Sure.
But it's your responsibility to figure it out, which is true or not.
But then, okay, so for a book publishing company or a TV producer, do they have a responsibility to make sure that the book that they publish or the TV show that they produce tells a true story?
I don't think a lot of people just focus on the true story. They producers or publishers will think about how to market their story. So for me, if someone who is from North Korea is lying about North Korea, it's also the responsibility of readers, audiences, because audiences want to click that story. Mm-hmm. So it's not only their fault, it's also the fault of audiences and readers as well, because a lot of majority people want to read the gigantic dramatic stories. So in capitalism, you have to make money. That's why, unless you educate yourself, that kind of stories will be reproduced every time, repeatedly.
Yeah. Now, if a young person listening to this podcast today, somebody, maybe not a North Korean refugee, but somebody from a difficult background, what practical steps would you suggest for building courage and dignity and creating their own identity?
I don't know. I'm the one who can give the advice or things, but from my experience, I can say, I think to have a gratitude, what you have right now instead of what you don't have, will lead you to be a better version of yourself. I think without that gratitude, you would complain all the stuff that would happen to you instead of thinking of what you have right now. So be grateful that you are given the freedom freely. Most of people like me had to go through a very perilous journey to have this freedom. Most of people never fought to earn it. So if you have that gratitude for the freedom, you will eventually to have the space to understand what others, are going through. And then if you hear someone's story like me, you think your life is much better than mine.
Okay. So always remember there's somebody in the world who has a more difficult life than mine.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So now that your book is out, The Courage to Die, what comes next for you? What's the next step in your life? If I meet you 1 or 2 years from now, what do you want to tell me you have done?
What I have done, maybe focusing on selling my books to not millions of people, but it's my ego to sell a lot of books because it is very important story. I don't want to compare with the other factors, but this one is independently published, which means I can carry authentic stories. And I put a lot of stories of South Korea that I had been through a lot of difficulties with the freedom. So you can relate it a lot of stories with yourself and then also with my family dynamics in North Korea. I mean, family problems is universal. So as you read my story, I mean, if someone who is struggling with the family members, they will also have the courage to live and then what it means to live as a human being with their own dignity, not rely on others.
Okay, but looking forward, do you hope to write a second book or maybe start a company or hire some people and do something? What's the next mission for you?
Next mission. I worked at an NGO for almost 3 years to support North Korean factors economic independence.
Do you want to name the NGO?
The Bridge International.
The Bridge
International. And what I learned from NGO is that without capital, you cannot do good work. Because
so
NGO rely on the funding, rely on the donors, which means without that sustainable profit, you cannot do good work. So while I was working, as my realization is maybe I don't know when I can become a successful entrepreneur, but I want to build something that I can produce a capital to help my people with my money. Not rely on the funding. But now I'm figuring out, I am having the degree of Korean teaching professionally. And my vision is like maybe go to the academic schools to be a Korean teacher, because I can be distinguished from other teachers because I have a Korean, like North Korean language and South Korean language. So it is very unique to audiences. If I learn all the process of business stuff, and I can build my own, and then I can produce the capital. That's my vision now. But at the same time, I have to sell books to reach out wide audiences, to tell what life looks like in North Korea, and also what the freedom means to people who just live in a free society.
That's a great answer. Thank you very much, Eunhee, for joining me today on the podcast. And just to remind our listeners, check out her book, The Courage to Die, and you can find her on Instagram at North Korea-Eunhee, Eunhee. Thanks again, Eunhee.
Thank you. You have wonderful questions.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our podcast episode for today. Our thanks go to Brian Betts and David Choi for facilitating this episode, and to our post-recording producer, Alana Hill, who cuts out all the extraneous noises, awkward silences, bodily functions, and fixes the audio levels. Thank you for listening, and listen again next time.